Step inside a medieval church, and you expect to see familiar images, saints carved in stone, angels in stained glass, the solemn figure of Christ at the altar. But if you lift your eyes and look carefully, another face emerges from the shadows. It is not holy, yet it is everywhere. This face is framed in leaves, its mouth spilling vines, its eyes open wide, as if it has been caught mid-breath. Sometimes it grins, sometimes it scowls, but always it stares back at you from the beams, the pillars, and the arches. It is not hidden in dusty corners. You'll find it above pews, between saints, and peering down from high rafters. Its placement feels deliberate, yet church records remain silent about its purpose or meaning. Welcome back to the Silent Lodge. If you enjoy unraveling mysteries and exploring the forgotten corners of history, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our future journeys. Historians first noticed these leafy faces in medieval churches dating back to the 11th century. At first, they were rough and Romanesque, with a bold, almost fierce expression. By the Gothic period, they became more intricate, grimacing or smiling amid swirling foliage. Leaves do not simply frame the face. They erupt from its mouth, curl from its nostrils, and in some rare carvings, burst from its eyes. The image is both beautiful and unsettling. No medieval document explains these carvings. They appear without caption or reference, as if their meaning was so obvious at the time that no one felt the need to write it down. It wasn't until 1939 that the figure was given a name. Lady Julia Somerset, also known as Lady Raglan, published an article in the journal Folklore. She called him the Green Man. Lady Raglan suggested that this wasn't a Christian symbol at all. Instead, she believed the Green Man was a survival of ancient pagan beliefs, a spirit of vegetation, fertility, and seasonal renewal that had somehow found its way into Christian churches. Her theory drew inspiration from Sir James Fraser's famous work, The Golden Bough, which examined myths of gods who die in winter and return in spring, bringing life back to the land. Lady Raglan also pointed to living traditions, May Day festivals, garlanding customs, and the figure known as Jack in the Green. These celebrations often featured people dressed entirely in leaves, paraded through the streets as symbols of spring. In these modern-day festivals, she saw echoes of the Green Man, a spirit of nature brought to life once a year. But while the connection seems tempting, later historians would discover a problem. The festivals she described were far younger than the medieval church carvings. That mystery, the gap between the Green Man in stone and the leafy figures in parades, would become one of the great puzzles of folklore. By the 12th, 13th, and 14th centuries, green men were everywhere in church architecture, staring down from vaulted ceilings, wedged between angels, or even tucked into choir stalls where only the most observant visitors might notice them. Yet, despite their abundance, no medieval writer left an explanation. No bishop's sermon, no parish record, no mason's handbook gives us a clue. The Green Man's silence is almost as striking as his presence. Lady Raglan's leap from stone carvings to May Day traditions seemed convincing at first. After all, the idea of a leafy figure tied to seasonal renewal fits perfectly with old European celebrations. Each spring, in parts of Britain, people gather for processions filled with greenery, music, and symbolic rituals to welcome summer. In Hastings, for example, Jack in the Green leads a raucous parade, a man entirely enclosed in leaves, followed by dancers, drummers, and costumed performers. The day ends with a symbolic act. Jack is stripped of his foliage, releasing the spirit of summer into the world. It's colorful, joyful, and steeped in symbolism. In Castleton, Derbyshire, a man is crowned the Garland King, riding horseback under a towering frame of flowers and leaves. At day's end, the garland is lifted onto the church tower, an unusual blend of folk tradition and Christian setting. And in Edinburgh, the Beltane Fire Festival sees a green man painted head to toe in vivid green, crowned with leaves, dancing through fire alongside the May Queen before his symbolic death and rebirth. It's easy to look at these modern traditions and imagine that they are ancient survivals of a pagan nature god, the same spirit carved into church stone centuries earlier. But there's a complication. Historians combed through older records and found that figures like Jack in the Green are absent from descriptions of May Day celebrations before the late 1700s. The earliest mention comes from 1770, when a French traveler described a London procession. Earlier accounts, even detailed ones from the 1600s, describe milkmaids carrying garlands and people dancing around maypoles, but no leafy man. This suggests Jack in the Green might be a later invention, perhaps shaped by Victorian Romanticism. So if the leafy figures in festivals appeared long after the Green Man carvings, then they cannot be the source of the church imagery. The timeline simply doesn't match. The question deepens. If the Green Man doesn't come from living folk tradition, where did he come from? To search for his origins, we must look far beyond England, tracing his leafy face through ancient civilizations and forgotten ruins scattered across the Old World. Long before he appeared in medieval churches, the Green Man's likeness was already staring out from stone in other parts of the world. In France, a 4th century tomb shows a man's face with leaves pouring from his mouth. In Germany, Roman sarcophagi bear human faces tangled with vines, the same curling foliage that would later frame the Green Man in English carvings. Travel further east, to the ruins of Hatra in modern-day Iraq, and you'll find a stone head from the 2nd century with leaves spilling from its lips. This imagery predates the medieval church by over 1,000 years. The pattern is impossible to ignore. The leafy face was not born in England nor in the Middle Ages. It had already traveled across cultures, from Roman villas to ancient temples, long before it was carved into Christian sacred spaces. But what did it mean to those earlier civilizations? No ancient writer left us a clear answer, yet many scholars believe the image symbolized fertility, renewal, or the eternal cycle of life and death. It's possible that for people of the Roman world, the image needed no explanation. Just as we instantly recognize certain symbols today, the leafy face may have carried a meaning so familiar that no one thought to record it. Some historians see echoes of old gods within the Green Man's features. The Celtic horned god Cernunnos, often linked to nature, animals, and fertility, is one candidate. In Roman myth, the god Oceanus appears crowned with seaweed, his face often framed by plant-like tendrils. In Greek tradition, Dionysus, god of wine, abundance, and ecstatic celebration, is depicted with ivy twisting through his hair. Even further afield, the Egyptian god Osiris was often shown with green skin, the color of vegetation and rebirth. His mythology tied him to the cycles of crops and the afterlife, themes that fit the Green Man's leafy visage. These parallels raise a fascinating possibility. The Green Man in churches may be a Christian reworking of much older pagan symbols. Early Christianity often absorbed and reinterpreted existing imagery to make conversion easier for local populations. By placing this ancient nature spirit inside the church, the early builders might have been giving the old god a new Christian identity, one that fit within their faith while still resonating with older cultural memory. But not every leafy face smiles with divine grace. Some appear twisted, grimacing, or almost monstrous. In these features, some researchers see a link to another ancient figure, the wild man of medieval legend. Hairy, untamed, and living on the fringes of society, the wild man was part human, part beast. He appears in carvings and manuscripts across Europe, sometimes side by side with the Green Man, as if the two shared a deeper connection. The wild man of medieval legend was no polite forest spirit. He was hairy from head to toe, carried a club, and lived beyond the boundaries of civilized life. Neither saint nor sinner, he existed in a world of his own, untamed and unpredictable. Medieval art often shows the wild man lurking in church woodwork or carved into stone alongside the Green Man. Their proximity has led some scholars to wonder if they are two faces of the same archetype, one celebrating nature's life-giving force, the other warning of its chaos. The Old English word wadwos appears in 14th century texts to describe these wild men of the woods, sometimes as dangerous creatures, sometimes as strange guardians. In the famous medieval poem Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, the hero rides through an ancient forest said to be prowled by wadwos, wild, inhuman beings. The Green Knight himself is enormous, green-skinned, and impossibly strong, blending traits of the wild man with the leafy spirit. Legends of the wild man stretch far beyond Europe. In the ancient Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, Enkidu is a wild man raised among animals. Only when tamed by human contact does he gain wisdom. In the book of Daniel, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar is said to have been driven to madness by God. His hair grew like eagle's feathers, his nails like bird's claws, and he lived like a beast in the field until his reason returned. Even the early Welsh version of Merlin depicts him not as a robed wizard, but as a warrior driven mad, fleeing to the forest to live in isolation, where he gained the gift of prophecy. These stories share a common theme: wisdom gained through wildness, knowledge revealed after madness or exile. Perhaps this is why medieval craftsmen placed the wild man, and by extension the Green Man, among the saints, as a reminder that understanding sometimes comes from the most unexpected paths. But there's another theory, one that takes us away from folklore and into the workshops of medieval stonemasons. These men belonged to powerful guilds, organizations that guarded their trade secrets and passed knowledge from master to apprentice. Masons developed secret marks to sign their work, geometric designs to encode meaning, and an artistic language that was not always meant for public understanding. Some believe the Green Man was part of this visual code, a motif known only to the craftsmen themselves. It could have been a test of skill, a signature flourish, or even a symbol carrying an esoteric message understood only within the guild. The absence of written explanations might be intentional. Secrecy was part of the tradition. Others argue the Green Man served a protective role, much like gargoyles on church roofs. His leafy stare could have been meant to ward off evil, blending the sacred with the natural. And yet, the mystery doesn't end here. The Green Man's image appears not only across Europe, but in far-off lands, in temples and shrines, thousands of miles from the medieval church, suggesting his story may be far older and far more global than we imagine. Across the temples of India, Indonesia, and Nepal, a fierce, fanged face peers out from intricate carvings. Surrounded by leaves, vines, and floral patterns, it looks uncannily like the Green Man. In these cultures, the figure is known as Kirtimukha, the face of glory. Far from being a decorative whim, it is a guardian spirit, placed above sacred doors to ward off evil and protect the space within. The resemblance is striking, and some historians believe it may not be coincidence. Through trade routes, pilgrimages, and even the Crusades, imagery traveled across continents, carried in illustrated manuscripts and merchant goods. European stonemasons could have encountered these Eastern motifs and adapted them into their own designs, giving birth to the leafy faces in churches. But the Green Man's trail doesn't stop in the East. It winds unexpectedly into the notebooks of Renaissance alchemists. seekers of hidden knowledge who studied the transformation of both matter and the self. For these alchemists, the cycles of nature mirrored the cycles of human growth. Just as trees shed old leaves and grow new ones, a person could shed ignorance, selfishness, or fear and become wiser, more balanced, and spiritually renewed. They called this inner transformation the greening of the soul. In their illustrations, leafy faces emerge from vines, bodies merge with flowers, and gardens represent the cultivated inner life. One recurring image is the green lion devouring the sun, a powerful symbol of nature's force to consume and regenerate. While not a green man in the strict sense, some versions bear a similar wild, leafy mane. In this reading, the green man becomes a mirror, not just a relic of pagan gods or a mason's flourish, but a reminder that renewal and change are part of life's natural rhythm. The leaves that sprout will one day fall, and yet from decay, new growth always comes. The green man's silent gaze may be a memento mori, a quiet truth carved in stone, telling us that all flesh returns to the earth, and from that return comes life again. Perhaps that is why he remains such a powerful image. Whether as a god of old, a guardian spirit, a secret emblem, or a symbol of inner rebirth, the green man speaks to something universal, our connection to the living world and the cycles that sustain it. So the next time you step into a church, look up. You may find his leafy eyes staring back at you, a silent reminder that nature's story is also ours. If you've enjoyed this journey into forgotten history and hidden symbols, consider subscribing to the Silent Lodge for more tales that reveal the mysteries of our past.